Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our next speaker, Raffaele Garofalo, presenting the topic, the automation of a landing zone.
A landing zone. And before starting, I would like to ask you if you can raise your hand. I have a small audience, but how many of you are aware of what is a landing zone? Cool. Awesome. So, what is a landing zone? I like to use the Amazonian way of explaining this concept. So first of all, it's what is the problem that we are trying to solve? And I like to make the example of running an airport. So if you think about it, let's say that you are the manager of an airport and you are in charge of taking care of everything. So when you manage an airport, first of all, you need to be sure that the airport it's operating 365 days a year, 24/7, because you can get passenger and flights every time of the day. And then you have to manage few activities of the airport. So one of them is you have to manage the traffic flow. So you have airplane leaving, airplane coming, you have delays, and you need to ensure that the traffic of this airplane is always smooth. Then you have passport control, and when you deal with passport control, you have to deal with regulation. So in reality, every country has different regulation, and your airport need to be aware of all the immigration law because you have people coming from all over. Then you have to deal with scheduling because the passenger walk across your airport and they need to be aware at any point in time of what is going on in the airport, where is my gate, where is my airplane, is it my airplane delay, when I can drop my baggage. Then you have to manage the passenger. So passenger need to stay in the airport, they need to find food, they need bathrooms, they need to find a place where they can sit and wait for the airplane. You have to manage baggage claim, which is quite complex because you will have all the baggage coming, it's automated, you have different gates where you can deliver the baggage to the passenger. And then you have the security control. So in the security control, you need to check the passenger and not carry over anything that is dangerous or harmful. Now you may say, okay, what's the point of this, of managing an airport with a landing zone? Then if we look at what is a landing zone, in reality, it's like an airport. So the landing zone is an area on the cloud where you want to deploy your resources and then you want to be compliant. That has to run 365 days a year, 24/7, and you need to manage certain activities. So it is not an airport, it's an IT product, so the activities are different. But for example, you have multi-account segregation, which is, in my opinion, a fundamental concept of cloud. So multi-account, if you are on AWS, if, for example, you are on Azure, you would call it multi-subscription segregation. You have to create architecture patterns, and especially if you are in the area of DevOps, you don't want that every team comes in and reinvent the wheel. So if you have a pattern like virtual machine with a load balancer, you want to ensure that that pattern is carried over every time a team wants to migrate into the cloud. So you need to create upfront all those architecture patterns and you want to distribute them across the company. You will have shared service. When I talk about shared service, for example, we can talk about authentication. So in an authentication shared service, maybe you use already in your company a product called Okta or Active Directory or any other. And all those shared services need to be configured in a way that when a team or a company approach your landing zone, they know already how to consume the shared service, what is going to be the implication of it, how much it's going to cost, and similar aspects. Then you want to have a baseline for governance. So the baseline is actually, if you think about AWS, when you come in as a DevOps engineer or a developer, you will go into aws.com, create an account, give the credit card, and you get one single account. But when you are a company, it's a bit more complex. So you go in And then we give you a cap of 3,000 accounts. So your DevOps team can actually spin AWS account as much as they want. But you want to create a baseline, because what you want to be sure is that every account complies to the same rule. For example, what virtual machine can I create? What is the size of the virtual machine? Which region can I use? Which region I cannot use? And so on. Because you want to control, you want to put guardrail to ensure that your landing zone doesn't become full anarchy. So you need a baseline. And the baseline is also something that you want to keep up to date and that you want to push also to existing account, because maybe the policy in your company change, or you realize that you're spending too much, so you want to reduce the amount of service or hardware that you want to allow to be used in the company. Then you want to be automation driven, which is overall the concept of this conference, right? We don't want to click anything. We want the development team deploy their code, and it's all fully automated. It is compliant, it is reliable, but the issue is that automating a landing zone, it's a different story. It's way more complex. But that's the key, actually, to accelerate. And then you want to be repeatable and reliable. So a landing zone is deployed, let's say, in a region. But there's no guarantee that it's staying alive, the region. You may have a disaster recovery situation. So at that point, maybe you have in your company an SLA of 4 hours. And within 4 hours, you need to ensure that the entire landing zone, so all those, I think I have a pointer. So all those aspects that we talk about, like the multi-account, the patterns, the shared service, the baseline and governance, it's repeatable in another landing zone, because you want to be disaster recovery compliant. And all of that has to be automated. So going back to the beginning, this is our airport. And now we are in charge of building the landing zone. And now, I don't know your specific job role, but as an AWS solution architect, I see two kinds of DevOps engineer. Let me put it this way. One is I work for a consulting company. I'm engaged with a big customer, and with my company, we build the landing zone for this customer. Or I work in a financial company, which is the customer that I have, and we have an internal team. And we decide to move to AWS, so we want to build the landing zone. So these are two different ways of approaching the landing zone. Internally, if you are a company and internally you decided to build it, for sure you need support from somebody outside, because for you it's the first time. So a lot of mistakes can be made. If I am a consulting company, I only build landing zone. So that's my job. I know how to do it. But the difficulty is to go to the customer and explain that their vision of the landing zone is not in reality what it's supposed to be. So then at this point, I want to show you a bit what is the workflow that I see at customers. So how you are supposed to approach a landing zone. Now, for this speech, I will start from zero. Let's assume that you have a very big company, you are on-premise, so you don't have a landing zone, and we start the conversation of building the landing zone. So this is overall the approach that we use in Amazon. So normally when I get in contact with a customer, we always start with the question, what problem are you trying to solve? Because if you don't have a problem, I'm not going to generate a problem for you so that my solution can be solved, right? So what is the problem? And this is starting from here, so the business need. Now, I had this conversation a few times. What's the reason of company moving to cloud? Primary reason is cost saving, right? There is no other reason. A company that is not an IT company will not move to cloud because they want to go serverless, because they want to use GenAI, because they want to use NoSQL database, or you name it, or microservice, micro frontend. They don't care this. They want to move to cloud because they have been told that they can save money. So that's the business need. Now, without the business need, you don't have a sponsor. So I think you hear me, yeah? So without the sponsor, the problem is that here you don't have the beautiful money that you, internal IT or consulting company, you need in order to move through this workflow. So it's extremely important that you first tailor the business need. You don't have to spend months in waterfall requirement analysis of what do we need. But what is important when you approach the creation of a landing zone is that you have a solid sponsor in the company or at the customer that envision with you the creation of this, because this is a very painful journey. It's not easy, and you will fail through the creation of a landing zone because it's not simple. And it's important that you have someone strong on the business side that keep supporting you financially, but also emotionally, because you're gonna be criticized for this. When you have the business need, let's say that we are successful in this part, then there are 5 different steps that we envision in the creation of the landing zone. But when you're here, we are not anymore waterfall. We are agile, so we reiterate. So the first part is the account. The first decision that you have to make when you create a landing zone is how many accounts? How do we use the account? What we do? Do we create one account, multiple environment? Do we create an account per environment? Do we create an account per company business unit? And inside there, a bunch of VPC? How we do that? There is no right solution, in my personal opinion. It depends. It depends on the company, it depends on the budget, it depends on the policy and regulation that you have in the company. And that's the first part. And this part, it's like what we call in Amazon a one-way door decision. There is a book that is called Working Backward, which explains you how Jeff Bezos created Amazon. And Jeff Bezos has 2 kind of decision. One is called one-way door decision. So I open the door, I made my decision, I close the door, it's over. I cannot open that door anymore. There is no way, because if I change that decision, I'm going to have a sunk cost. So all the money that I invest to make the decision, it's gone. And then you have other decision that is called two-way door decision. So it's a door that I can open, I made the decision, I made a mistake, then I can step back and say, hey, let's try a different way. So when you create a landing zone, you need to think about it. A large organization, I have organizations that have like 4,000 or 5,000 accounts. Each account, it's one or more applications. So when you set the baseline of the landing zone, you cannot say later, hey, you know what? We think that maybe we remove internet access from the subnet because maybe you have 300-400 applications that they're using it. So there are certain decisions on the landing zone, and I think the account is the fundamental one where you really need to sit down with the IT team of the company and try to understand how you want to structure the account. Because if you design it wrong, you can change it, but it's going to be painful. And longer you wait, more painful it is. Then we have the networking part. So when you approach the network, it's not just about the VPC and the amount of IP that you want to have in a VPC. That's the easy part. But you have some core service. For example, what firewall do you want to use? Do you have a firewall for each VPC? Do you allow traffic between VPC? Do you want to inspect the packages between VPC? Is it required by your company? Do you allow internet connection? Then you have direct connect, so the VPN, because you move to cloud, but you have already something, right? Maybe a different cloud provider, maybe on-prem. Is not a greenfield company that you start from zero. So how do you connect to your existing instance? You want to connect with direct connect, you want to have a VPN, you go straight to public internet connection, you expose all your database or your server. I saw that, not a very good decision. Domains, DNS, how do you manage that today? Do you have a DNS server? Do you have a domain provider that also issue your TLS certificate? What do you want to do there? You want to keep it? You want to do it on your own? Do you have a team that is skilled about it, that know how to do it? And then that would be the network. Then we jump into security. So the first aspect of security is like more than configuring it, it's tailoring security around guardrail. So image, I'm talking about hardening. So if you think about Docker, if you think about virtual machine, you pull down an operating system. But that operating system, you pull it down from the marketplace. So we are just giving you the latest version of Alpine. We don't check what's in there because it's not our job. You ask me for a product, I give you the product. But then, are you sure that that version of Alpine is compliant with the security regulation of your company? How do you manage that that Alpine version has always the latest patches? If it doesn't, what happened in the company? Because maybe you have a bunch of Docker now outside running in production, but that version of the operating system now is not compliant anymore. So how do you enforce in the landing zone that when, because the dev team, I'm also a developer, so I'm not talking bad about developers, but the developer itself, it will never worry about, let me create a new Docker for the microservice, but let me ensure that I pull the Alpine version that is compliant, because risk and compliance created a Confluence page with those version of Alpine, and I need to be diligent. They don't do that. They do npm install and whatever comes from internet, they just install it because it works. So you need to configure that part. Config, so AWS config allow you to ensure that nobody change anything. Let's say in the company we use Terraform. So inside Terraform, I allow you to choose only certain size of the EC2, of the virtual machine. But I have a DevOps engineer that somehow got a role where he's allowed to go into the account and change the EC2. How do I see that happening? Can I block that? Because I don't want that happening. So you need to configure config in a way that is going to be your policeman. So you want to have a policeman on the landing zone that keep checking everything to ensure that we don't have someone smarter than us that they go there and move away, so drift away from the configuration that we want to enforce. And then logging. This is in the cloud. Of course, you have to be careful because CloudWatch is very powerful but very expensive, but you need it because it's not your on-prem server. The only way that you have to understand what is going on any cloud provider is through the log. If you don't have the log, it's game over. It's too late. When you realize that something happened and the business come to you, DevOps engineer or system integrator shouting, say, hey, this thing is in production, it's not working, what is going on? And you open the log and the log is empty because you say, let me be wise. Let me put a log on error. So if there is no error, I don't trace anything. And then it's game over because if we don't have a time machine, you cannot go back and say, hey, can you generate the log of yesterday because I had some incident? That's about security. Then identity. So this is the most painful part. So identity means who can do what. We have access, we have identities, and we have federation. There is no one company that approach cloud that doesn't have all of them already in place. Now, are we going to a company and say, hey, you have 50,000 employees, but they are on Azure Active Directory. Now you're moving to AWS. Sorry, you have to recreate all the identity. You have to reset all the password. You have to do something. No, you don't do that, right? So you need to find a way to federate your existing identity management, and you want to make it in a way that the employee, they use the cloud service, doesn't even see it happening. For them, nothing changed. You have to manage the identity and the access. So you want to create persona. Who are you? I am a DevOps engineer. I am an employee. I'm a data scientist. And based on that, you want to authenticate the person and grant certain privileges. And you want that happen on-prem, on AWS, on Azure, on Google Cloud, and it has to be smooth, right? They don't have to go through the pain of entering a password. They don't have to go through the pain of saying, well, I can query a database on Azure, on AWS I cannot because the personas are different. So this is what you want to design when you create a landing zone. And then user. So user here is, who is the user? I am a DevOps engineer. Who is my user? My user is a developer of the company that spin a service, is an application team that deploy the application, is another DevOps engineer, but not the one that work in the core team like me. So not the one that build the landing zone, but the one that is coming in and you need to create certain service for that application. So those are my users. And my users are consumers. So now I became a service provider because I provide a landing zone with service in it. So you want to create a service catalog, you want to have automation, and you want to have end user iteration because interaction, sorry. Because what you don't want is to have your Slack, Teams, whatever chat tool you use keep popping because they will bother you, right? Hey, how I do this? Hey, how it works this? How can I create a VM? I create a VM, doesn't work. The Terraform module that you made is buggy. You don't want that. So you need to create, you have to become within the company a service provider. Then you finish, you're done, you lose your job because the landing zone is ready. No. What happened is at this point in time, you need to migrate and good luck because this is the difficult part. Because now you create a perfect landing zone, but you need to migrate a company that is using Windows 2000 and Windows 2000 doesn't exist on cloud anymore. But they use it, it works. And they're telling you, hey, look, on-prem it works. It doesn't bother me. I don't want to upgrade. I don't want to pay license. I don't want to change my code. Oh, they have a version of Linux that AWS doesn't even have on the marketplace. But they use it. It works. So this part, then you have to iterate because you realize that your perfect design, when you start to have 50,000 users and 1,000 application and 2,000 AWS account and 3,000 VPC, it's completely unmanageable. So what you do, you start from the beginning and you reiterate all this design. So you need to be sure that this design, it was open from change from day one, because you will have to go back a certain point in time and rethink what you have done and maybe need to adjust it. And then you have to operate and you have to optimize, because after a year you receive your $2 million bill, the CFO come to you and say, hey, Raf, now your KPI is reduce of 10% cloud consumption. You're like, how come? I have to migrate more apps, I have to reduce 10%. But you have to do it. So this is actually the workflow. And let me check the time. So now I will touch each point of the workflow. I think I touched it already, but just to give you a better overview. So let's start with the account. Here it's a bit like, say, what is better, Java or .NET? I'm not going to go there. So what kind of strategy do you want to use? I mean, there are many. I will not tell you what it's better, because I have this logo on the t-shirt, so I have to be careful when I speak. I tell you what I think, so Raf, what he think based on his experience, and I saw that the most successful customer is the one that is more granular. So you need to be aware of a beautiful problem called blast radius. It's real, it happens. So if you create for every application an account for every environment, what happens is the blast radius will never be larger than one application, one environment. On terms of cost, it will not cost you more because AWS doesn't charge you for the amount of AWS account that you create. As far as the account is empty, you pay nothing. But the management of it, the complexity, it's bigger. But that's the way I see it. Now, how can you ensure that the accounts is properly structured? These things here, this one doesn't have time machine. So be verbose, create the tags, tag everything, cost center, application owner, application name, application ID if you have an application catalog in the company, environment name, you name it. When you have tagging done properly, you can create really beautiful reports that really drill down. Because when you have 3,000-4,000 applications running and you get a bill of 2 million, the CFO say, okay, can you tell me which one is overspending? And if you don't break down every single service with the tagging, there is no other way that you can find out that. Believe me, there is no way. So tagging, it's fundamental. AWS organization, if you're familiar with organization, it's something that you need to use, right? Except you have 3 AWS accounts, you need an organization. And what it does, the organization allow you to orchestrate many accounts. You can create organizational unit, you can push down policy and security controls so that you can have a sort of cascading governance. And the AWS organization is also beautiful because you can grab a bunch of AWS account from one organizational unit. You can enforce new security controls. You put all of them in the new organizational unit and you enforce a new baseline. Account strategy, I talk extensively. It's important. You will debate, be ready, have backbone. That's what we say in Amazon. So show that you are an expert on landing zone. You have the backbone to prove that you're right, because this is something that you will debate very heavily. Isolation, blast radius, these two work together. Careful, because it happened not because you did something wrong, but because you gave an AWS account to a junior developer that when he realized that there was internet, he spin an EC2 and started to use Facebook on the EC2 machine because he was not allowed on the laptop. I saw these things happening, right? I saw it. So careful here. Centralized logging, you need it. It's the only way to understand what is going on. X-ray and log. If you don't have that, you have nothing else to understand what's happening. And billing visibility. So billing without tagging, you just get one total, 2 million. Now, good luck. If you have tagging, you can say, well, we have a company distributed across east of Europe. So I saw that 700K it's Lithuania, 300K is Latvia, and a million is actually our Poland office. And now I can break down further. I can tell you that in Poland, 300K is HR and 400K is another office. So now in this way, you give a tool to the CFO to cross-charge cloud consumption. And you can do that with tagging and billing visibility. Next one is an example. So I need to accelerate a bit. So this is actually when you create with Control Tower beginning landing zone. And the idea overall is you want to have an account where you do management. So nobody has access except the mega powerful DevOps engineer that manage what is called the core team. And then you want to create sandboxes OU where you provision the account to the application team and they can only stay here. And then you want to have an audit account where you have your baseline, your security notification, all the config. And then you want to have a log archive account where you probably want to dump inside a Glacier S3 bucket all the logs for audit reason and things similar like that. So like this is just an example, right? Very basic. Then next we go to the network. Here I will try to be a bit faster. So we talked before about it. What I think is very important here is access control list and security control and security group, they are firewall. So if AWS give you an EC2 that by default you cannot access because there is no traffic open, it's not because we are lazy, it's because there is a reason behind. So putting like 0000 star, this kind of pattern, because you don't want to think, it's not a good way. So when you design a landing zone, what's your role? Your role is to create pattern that by default, app team have zero access. And then they need to challenge themselves and try to understand, okay, what kind of access I need? For example, by default, having port 80 open or RDP protocol open or SSH open is not a good practice because you don't know how it's going to be used. Logging and monitor, we talk about it. VPN direct connect, here we can spend hours about it. My question is how much money you want to spend? Let's go down to the bottom of it, right? Do you want 10 gigabyte direct connect to your on-prem? Can you afford it financially? Because that's the only thing. This one here is where you will cry. So here is get this wrong and game over, because if you work on AWS, you know when you create a VPC, you cannot extend the CIDR, right? It's written in stone. It's like Moses. You get it. That's it. You can create a new one on top of it. You have to connect them. You can create another VPC in the account. You can do VPC peering. but you have egress. You're going to pay for it. Subnet, no overlapping IP. These two go together, and if you do the SA Associate and the SA Pro certification on AWS, we bombard you with this because there is a reason behind, right? So this is very important, and this is where you actually want to give reasoning. Don't be what I call like, I cannot use any non-inclusive words, so let me think about something polite. Don't be a dictator. Give the space to the team to choose. So in your Terraform, if you use Terraform, give options like a small VPC, a medium VPC, a large VPC, so that the team can choose between 12, 40, 100 IP range. But give the opportunity. I saw a company providing VPC with 8 IP, and I'm like, what is going to happen there? 2 VM, game over. So try to think about it when you provide the network configuration. So a bit of flexibility, but not too much. And always zero trust. So then here an example, what is going to be a network design on a landing zone. It could be I have my on-prem, then I have a customer gateway, so you have already some sort of VPN provider. Then you're going to have a direct connect, and then the direct connect on AWS is going to go through, for example, this is one way, a transit gateway, and then each VPC can, contain the blast radius, but through the gateway they can go back forward to the VPN, because in reality, remember, your employee is going to have the laptop running here. And if you create an application here, by default, we assume that this is visible internally, right? So this is kind of the design that you need to foresee, that you have to document, so that when someone approaches your landing zone, you say, hey, look, this is how it works, right? And then in this case, you have maybe another organization, because you also run VMware, and maybe you don't even run it on AWS, you run it somewhere else, right? So you need to kind of think this way. Then next one is security. And security, here, the conversation can go through authentication, authorization, federation. There are different aspects, right? What I think it's important is, first of all, a bit of marketing. So guard duty for threat detection. You have different version of it. If one is free, when something is free, I'm Italian, right? Just take it. It's free. You don't pay for it. Just use it, right? There is no point. It's there. It's a bit like when you go to the apero. If they give us some food, is on the table, I eat it, even if I'm not hungry, because it's been given to me as a gift, right? I'm polite. So guard duty, use it. CloudWatch alarm. CloudWatch alarm have action. So I give you an example. I had a customer that had a budget limit of 1,000, and they put the alarm, and the alarm was saying, hey, when it's 800, go nuke, because I cannot spend more. And they got a bill with a zero more than 1,000. And then they were blaming, and I said, can you show me your alarm? And the alarm had the action table, if you are familiar with it, it was empty. So I say, look, it's like you put an alarm in your house, a thief came in, break the glass, the alarm activated, but you forgot to plug the bell, right, the siren. So the alarm did nothing. So the alarm itself, it's useless if what's the action? So if something happened, if I have something happening based on a rule on CloudWatch, but then what? Do I kill the VM? Do I kill the service? Do I send an email? Do I create a service now ticket? Do I send an SMS to the CEO of the company? Whatever, like do something here. CloudTrail Log, I think I mentioned that this is your tool. VPC flow log, you want to have it, right? Because you're going to have this beautiful call where somebody that doesn't really have your skills will spin something and say, hey, you know what? Your landing zone is crap because I spin this service and now from my MacBook, I can't see it. And maybe they probably did something wrong. And then you need the VPC flow log, and you need also additional X-ray log to understand the traffic, how it's going, and tell them where the traffic is blocked. AMI factory for hardened OS. So this is very specific to financial companies, so it's my sector, or to pharma, or to other companies that are highly regulated. So what you need to do is you have to create a repository of OS image so that when someone create a new virtual machine, a new EC2, they pull an image that at that point in time is compliant, not that was patched 3 months ago, and as soon as they spin, they have to do an update on Linux or run Windows update on Windows. That's just useless. It's pointless. There is no reason to do that. So you have to keep this up to date constantly. And then you need to figure out, but how I'm going to push this to things that I have in production for a year? Because that OS now is in production and it's not okay, it's not patched. And the team doesn't want to patch because they never have time. So you need to find a way to push that. For example, with patching window. So you don't give them an option to negotiate. It's like the third weekend of the month, we do patching window. We take down everything, patch it, and turn it on. And then AWS config rules for compliance. So I explained you this before. It's like, in my company, I don't want that you use Red Hat because we don't want to pay the license. I don't want that you spin RDS Oracle because we don't have a commercial deal with Oracle. And you put me in trouble if you do that. So all these kind of rules that you want to be sure that are matched, not that someone override it and create troubles for the company. Then let's look for a moment on identity. I keep looking here because I have the timer running. So just a second. I get it tell me that I'm 35 minutes. Is that correct? Or I have more? 8 only. Okay. All right. So identity here. So what happened is this is actually a student resource. It's a university, and they have already all this on-prem. So when they approach AWS and they want to migrate, logically, I'm not going to propose them to use Identity Center on AWS, migrate all the students' accounts. They want to leverage all of this, and they want to federate their persona, their roles into AWS, right? So this is what you have to figure out when you're going to touch the identity part. And then the consumption model. So you reach a point now where all these things that we talk about, you become a service provider. So how you're going to enable a consumption model? And the consumption model is actually the application team comes, they want to create 2 Apache server, a load balancer, they want to go public internet with that application, and they want to do it within an hour. So with the service catalog, you can generate Terraform and CloudFormation patterns that they can just pull, push the button, deploy, and you have hardened patterns that you can give to application team to easily deploy your application. This requires a lot of investment in terms of time, but believe me, it's an extreme accelerator. I have customers now that they have massive migration, so they migrate thousands of platforms. And when they have this done, it took them a year to build it properly, but then every day they push out one app because it's always the same story, right? Take the package, create the servers, push it, go live. So this is a very good investment in AWS Service Catalog. And then this is going to be an example of Service Catalog. So you see now you became a service provider within AWS. So in AWS, you're going to create your catalog of pattern, infrastructure patterns, and then you're going to deliver them through CI/CD. In this case, I use CloudFormation. You can use Terraform or anything else. And then the catalog will provide different patterns. For example, you want to go serverless, you want to go microservice with containers, you want to go N-tier standard. And then those are the way that you can, for example, structure your service catalog. And they can pull things out of it and spin it. And then they always spin it in the way that you're comfortable. So that would be the final picture. You've been successful, you create a landing zone, so you have a bunch of accounts that you use to control and to track information for audit, and then you segregate the account of an application, for example, by environment, so prod, dev, and UAT. Challenge. So design decision, you will do a lot of them. Don't be scared, you will make mistakes. I make mistakes. Just take it. Don't take it personal. You are human. You will make mistake. You will build experience. You build experience by making mistake. So accept it. Document everything that makes sense. I saw company with 30,000 pages of Confluence with copy-paste of Terraform module. Nobody will ever read that things, ever. And you spend a year. So wasted time. Cloud role persona. So AAM role policy. Create persona. So look at your company. What do you have in a company? You have an employee, you have a developer, a DevOps engineer, a data scientist. So create those persona and assign permission on the persona. And when the company evolve, what you do, you simply evolve the persona that you have with the permission that are required. It's a lot easier to manage because then you point the finger, say, hey, you are a data scientist. Why you want to be able to raise ticket on AWS console? That's not your role. That's a DevOps engineer role. Yep. And then creation of a baseline. So the baseline, it's fundamental because with the baseline, you are saying when I create an account, I have certain firewall rules, I have certain rules on the VPC and many other services. When you have a baseline, it's a bit like, you know, the main branch that you have when you write code. So the baseline is something that you want to keep up to date, and you want to find a way. There are multiple ways to do that. You want to find a way to push the baseline on all the existing things that you have in production, because you want to be sure that at any point in time you get an audit and your landing zone is fully compliant. And then I say, of course, automation. So we talk about it. There is a product called Control Tower, which I think most of you, if you work on AWS, if you know landing zone, you know this. But Control Tower, it's mega powerful, it's really good, but I work with cloud formation. So I'm a Terraform dude. How can I do that? So I wrote a blog post about it on AWS. You can see it through my LinkedIn profile. In reality, company today use Control Tower Account Factory for Terraform. It's really beautiful. If you know Terraform, if you work with landing zone, I suggest you to have a look. It's a very nice product. And what you can do, you can actually fully automate a landing zone. And this is the real DR. So here you are disaster recovery compliant. You can spin in 10 minutes a new landing zone. And you would make the risk team of the company very happy. Give it a look. I mean, it's a nice product. I don't get any money from Terraform. I just think it's a very valid solution. And then I think I have time for questions.
Test, test. Thank you for your talk. Let's go directly to a couple of Slido questions that we have, and then I'll ask the people here around if there are any questions more. So what mistakes companies do most when designing or using a landing zone?
All right, so I think that the mistakes that they do most is they take for granted. So again, as I said at the beginning, you are a DevOps engineer, but that doesn't imply that you know what the customer wants. So use the Amazonian way. It's like, what problem are you trying to solve? So most of the company, the mistake that they make is they invent service that nobody need. I see company spending months on service like Beanstalk and realize later that nobody want to use Beanstalk. So why you spend time on it? So use the approach the other way around. So that's the mistake that I always see is that they invent patterns on the landing zone that nobody asked for. So that's very common.
Okay. And the second question, when you are creating the landing zone for a company, does the company later take over and manage it, or AWS manages it?
We don't create it. So I am a solution architect. So what happens is when you are a customer, I am a free resource. I will never send you an invoice. So I come with your team and I try to help you by sharing knowledge. Normally, there are two patterns. One is the company create the landing zone themselves, or the company leverage a consulting company. I cannot mention any name, you know guys, right? So normally, yes, what happens is you have the first year, the consulting company create the landing zone, and then you see the transition where the company internally acquire the knowledge and take over. It depends. There are million ways to do it. You need people, right? If you want to take it over, not to DevOps engineer for sure.
Thank you. Do we have questions in the hall? I know it's early. No? Okay, you still have an opportunity to catch Raf outside and ask him more questions.
Yeah, and this is my email, so I always answer, so feel free to write me an email if you have a question, okay?
So, round of applause for our speaker. Thank you.